Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Wealth Witch podcast. I am your host, Leah Steele, the Wealth Witch. I've really been looking forward to recording this episode. I've had some ideas that have been dropping in over the last couple of weeks for this episode, and I feel like it may end up being a little ranty. And it also might be a little bit all over the place. So just bear with me because there's some ideas that I want to talk about. There's some concepts that I want to talk about. I'm sure it will end up all tying in together, but I'm just going to dive in and see where this journey takes us. The first thing that I really wanted to talk about is that I've been having a deeper awareness and realization around how irrelevant it is whether or not people like me. And that goes for the listeners of this podcast as well. It really is not relevant if you like me. I'm not here on this planet. I wasn't put here on this earth for people to like me. I was put here to affect change. I was put here to wake people up to the manipulation and the programming and the conditioning that exists inside the collective. I was put here to help people be able to see how the global financial elite control and manipulate the collective. So, that's kind of the first thing. And that's obviously a difficult thing because I'm a human being, obviously. And my feelings get hurt sometimes. And if I get a bad review on the podcast, that stings a little bit. I read all of the reviews that I get on the podcast. I have a service that actually enables me to read those reviews, and it's great feedback for me because it helps me really understand where I'm connecting, where I need to do a better job of connecting. And rarely do we get bad reviews, but there's been a couple that have been quite scathing. And so it's not to say that those things don't affect me, but it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. My ego and my bruised ego or how it feels when somebody says they don't resonate with me or they don't like what I'm saying, it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that I'm showing up day after day and doing my divine mission work in the world, that I'm continuing to show up whether I feel like it or not for the purpose that I was sent to this planet for. And so I share that with you because I think somebody needs to hear that. There's probably several somebodies that need to hear that. It's sometimes really hard to do our purpose work because if we're really here to create big impact, a lot of people aren't going to like that. And if we are here to get people questioning programming and conditioning that has existed for generations and generations and generations, then there are strong spells and wards put in place to protect that programming and conditioning. So when I say spells, what do I mean? Do I mean actual spells? Well, yes, I actually do. I do mean actual spells. I believe that there is significant dark occult magic that protects a lot of the programming and conditioning of the collective. And that dark occult magic gets triggered when people like me are out there trying to wake people up to it. When we're creating the little, glitches in the matrix, if you will, that are enabling people to see how they're being programmed and to see how they're being conditioned. So, being in that position and doing that work in the world, it means that there's a lot of people out there that don't like me. It means that there are a lot of people who are being triggered to oppose me because in opposing me, perhaps they get me to fall back in line. Perhaps they get me to stay in my place. Perhaps they get some other members of the collective that might start to be listening to me to say, yeah, you're right. She's no good. What she's doing isn't right, and it isn't in the highest and best interest of the collective. Let's fall back into the programming. Let's fall back into the conditioning. Let's fall back into not being able to see what's blatantly right there in front of our faces. So, it's something that I actually have to visit quite often is what is really important? And is it really important that people like me? Is it really important that everyone agrees with what I say? Well, here's the thing. I hope that you don't agree with everything that I say. I hope that you really take to heart the things that I continually tell you on this podcast, which are around questioning everything, including me, right? For me, it is so important that you take what serves you from this and you leave the rest. I don't want a bunch of clones of Leah running around on this planet. I really want people to think for themselves. I really want people to begin to question even the things that they've believed their whole entire life are true. And so the things that resonate with you, those are the things that you should take. And the things that don't, you don't have to agree with me on everything. If everyone agreed with me on everything, what a boring world this would be. I certainly need people to question me, because in that questioning, when people question me and they question the divine downloads that I'm getting and that I share with you, it gives me an opportunity to go back and get more clarity from the divine, to get more clarity from God, source, universe, all that is, whatever it is that you call it, to get more clarity from that highest level version of myself. It is in the questioning and it is in the questions that we get more clarity. And that goes for all areas of life. So I welcome those. I welcome those questions. And I believe that we all can show up with differences in opinions. And that's the beauty of humanity. It is not in the assimilation. The global financial elite would love us to believe that the most important thing for us is to assimilate, because when we're all assimilating, we're easier to manipulate and control. When we're all assimilating, we're not actually fully stepping into our power. And that is their number one means of control, is assimilation. So it is through the questioning that we recognize and we realize our power. And that's the beauty of humanity, right? Is that we get to have differing opinions. One of the things about the US election that made me so sad and so frustrated is that here's a nation that was built upon foundations of democracy and people being able to have differences of opinions. And instead of being able to have those differences of opinions and still respect each other, the United States has literally just turned into a war of perceived morals, values, and ideals, where you have one side attacking the other. And you can see it now in the news. You can see it now in the media, where before President Trump left office, it was President Trump is so horrible. Look at all these horrible things that he's doing, all of the attacking on him. And the right, the supporters of President Trump, it was, look how horrible Biden is. Look how amazing President Trump is. Literally, all we've done is switch out the figurehead. Now Joe Biden is president. And all you're seeing now is the right, look what a horrible job he's doing. Look how horrible he is. And yeah, the right saying that. And then the left saying, it was so much better when Trump was in office. Look at what an idiot Biden is. And I feel like maybe I just messed that up a little bit, but you get my drift. Like, I'm sure you're picking up what I'm putting down at this point. Literally all we've done is swap places and nobody's happy. The left all thought as soon as Joe Biden took office, then everything was going to be righted and everyone was going to be happy that was a Democrat. And it's just not true. They're continuing to harp on how horrible President Trump was. The President Trump fans are now harping on how horrible President Biden is. And there's no respect. There's no mutual feeling of we're all humans just doing the best that we can. Let me tell you something. This is exactly what the global financial elite wants, because they do not have a political party. They do not have a political party. They don't care if you are a Democrat or a Republican. What they care about is the fact that you show up day after day and operate as the compliant commodity that they have programmed and conditioned you to be. That is all they care about. The rest is a distraction. And so seeing the United States and the population of the United States play into this left or right perceived morality and values bullshit has been very frustrating to me because we're not respecting each other. We're not allowing each other to have differing opinions. And until you have walked a mile in another person's shoes or lived a lifetime in another person's life, you cannot possibly understand or conceive of why they feel the way they do about a certain thing. And I believe that each and every person on this planet deserves to be respected. For me, my midheaven is Gemini. And so I have this incredible ability to see the duality in things. And it's a gift that I was given. And I'm so, so grateful for that because I truly think it is one of the main things that allows me to see through the duplicity and to see the programming and the conditioning is that I am always able to sort of weigh both sides. And it's why you won't see me taking a side in a political conversation, because I can see why the right feels the way it does, and I can see why the left feels the way it does. And I believe that there are things to be learned from both sides. And that was originally what the United States of America was intended to be. In fact, there were checks and balances put in place so that each side could be equally represented. Well, that's all gone out the window now, right? So I wasn't intending for this podcast to turn into this big political conversation, but I think it's a really good current example of what we're talking about here, which is trying to find a way to respect each other through our differences. And I think that's really important. And so I kind of want to segue now into another conversation that I wanted to have. And it's about something else that you hear me talking about frequently, which is that you are the most powerful creator in your reality. What I'm seeing a lot of in the collective right now is people buying into victim mentality and believing that they are a victim of their circumstances, which is simply just not true. And I know that I will likely be attacked for spiritual bypassing by some people by saying this, but I think it's really important to recognize and realize who true victims are and who people are that are getting a payoff from staying in victim mentality. So I was on a Clubhouse meetup with my good friend Jason Cisneros, who I have done podcasts with on this podcast. I've been featured on his podcast, The Bald Avenger. And definitely, if you're not following him, go do that. He's an incredible, incredible human being with some very, very strong opinions. And I believe is doing a lot of really important work in the world. He does a lot of work around sex trafficking, and he has a community called Misfit Nation. And he talks a lot about this, and we were having a conversation about this yesterday, about not being a victim to your circumstances and who the true victims are. And this is something that requires the ability to really hold yourself accountable, and it requires a deep level of introspection to look and see where you're showing up in victim mentality, where you're allowing the payoff that you're getting from being a victim to outweigh your desire to live the life that you deeply desire, right? So, we have people who are true victims, people that are sold into slavery, for example, children that are sold into sex slavery. There are people that are true victims of life, women that are in domestic violence situations. And then there are people that choose to stay in states of victim mentality because they receive sympathy. It's easier for them to stay a victim than it is to pull themselves up and elevate themselves out of their circumstances. You are the most powerful creator in your reality. And that goes for every single person on this planet. And when we are choosing to stay in a scenario or a situation because the thought of moving out of it is more uncomfortable than the discomfort that we're experiencing in the moment, that's when we're allowing ourselves to stay steeped in victimhood. and in victim consciousness. When we choose our current discomfort over the discomfort of growth and expansion, we're choosing victim mentality. Our sovereignty, our free will and our sovereignty is the biggest gift that we've been given. And yet, as a collective, we continually surrender it to things outside of ourselves. We continue to seek external validation. We continue to seek externally for the power source to charge our internal battery, when the truth is that we have all of the answers inside of us. We have all of the things that we need inside of us. When we are willing to hold ourselves accountable, when we are willing to practice radical self-responsibility and self-accountability, that is when we are able to move out of states of victim mentality, when we are able to step into our power, when we are able to fully realize the incredible, incredible creator that we are. But we have to be willing to look at where we're getting those payoffs. And that work in and of itself is really uncomfortable because a lot of us have these martyrdom complexes. A lot of us have these savior complexes. A lot of us are in a place and position, especially those of us that are mothers, where we have been rewarded so much for overgiving, from giving from a depleted cup, that it's the only way that we know. We validate ourselves by our victimhood. We validate ourselves by continuing to overextend ourselves. We validate ourselves by the struggle and by the payoff that we get from people saying, "Oh, look what a good person you are. Look at how much you've struggled. Look how much trauma you've endured. Look how much you give. Look how much you are of service," when we're not being of service to ourselves. Now is the time to step into our sovereignty. We have an incredible, incredible opportunity right now on this planet to raise the collective consciousness, to ascend beyond all of this fuckery that we're living in and existing in right now. But we cannot do that by continuing to focus externally. We have to turn our focus internally right now. We have to start calling ourselves on our shit. We have to start holding ourselves radically responsible for self and for our actions. We have to look at where we are inhibiting our spiritual, psychological, and physical growth. We have to begin taking personal inventory of the ways that we are holding ourselves back and be willing to shift and change those things. Because we only rise as a collective from a place of sovereignty. We have to step into and harness our own individual power. And then from that place of individual power, we can come together and make a difference together. But as long as we're overgiving, as long as we're giving from depleted reserves, as long as we're continuing to buy into martyrdom complexes or savior complexes, we aren't actually showing up as the highest level version of ourselves. We aren't actually showing up as the divine, immortal being that we are. And we're not being authentic. So we're showing up as a representative of somebody that we think the world wants us to be, not as who we truly are. And we can't show up as who we truly are if we're not willing to fully embrace our sovereignty, if we're not willing to put ourselves and our personal growth and development and expansion first. Make it the number one priority, because it is from that place that we actually get to make a difference. So again, it's not relevant if you like me. It's not relevant if you like the things that I'm saying in this podcast. Does it spark something in you? Does it make you uncomfortable? Do you feel like you've been called on your shit? Does it give you pause? Does it make you question something that you may have been doing? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, I've done my job. If you simply start questioning, where am I holding myself back? Where am I engaging in victim mentality? Where am I not willing to embrace the discomfort of change, growth, and expansion because the discomfort of where I am right now is more comfortable than what I perceive the discomfort is going to be of change and growth? If you are questioning that, if you are asking yourselves that, I've done my job and you don't have to like me. And you can take what serves you from this podcast and leave the rest because you have free will. And that would mean that you were stepping into your sovereignty. So those are my wealth witch wisdoms for the day. I hope you have taken something valuable from this podcast. I love being here and spending time with you. And we've got some really exciting episodes coming up in the coming weeks. So make sure to come back and listen. And if you have not already, subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. And remember, it is your divine birthright to be wealthy in all areas of your life. And you are so worthy and you are so deserving.